Cool. Geoff, I think we're live. Maybe we should just check that, actually. This is how fresh and new this episode is. If anyone's in the comments already after going live for 10 seconds, can you let us know? I've got the chat up. It seems something just popped up to say that we've gone live, so I think we're good. Geoff, appreciate you joining us, and us both kickstarting something here that hopefully is useful for the wider community. I can see there's a few people on as well, so that means some people drag themselves out of bed to have a watch. Yeah, I think just an intro into like what me and Geoff are trying to do here is really, I guess, uplift, upskill, enable everyone to take a look into this world of DevOps, cloud, new technologies, and all of that stuff. And by episode one, give us an intro into who me and Geoff are, what we do, where we come from, but also some of that learning journey that me and him have both been on, separate paths, but similar outcomes. In fact, Geoff, you've gone more into the AI world recently as well. We'll get into that. But I think at least when I first started that route down DevOps, or understanding what DevOps was and cloud was and all of that, it was very daunting. There's a lot of new stuff out there. So yeah, that's like a very brief intro, very laid back, an hour long. If Geoff runs out of stuff to say, that is.
That never happens. Ask my boss.
But yeah, I guess, Geoff, why don't you kick things off and just give a bit of an intro into who you are, what you do now, where you come from, and all of that good stuff.
Yeah, so first of all, I'll excuse people if you suddenly see the halos when I do that. It's because I'm slowly rising to the this is a new setup, so I'm trying to maneuver myself. And the big challenge I have is it's in Toronto in the morning and the sun comes up in the east, and then it just blasts this. So I got to play with it. Anyways, enough of my technical fun. So if you see the halos, don't worry, it's not some alien. So yeah, my name's Geoff Burke. I've been doing IT for about 20 years, data protection for the last 15. And so predominantly working with Veeam software. Later on, when I started getting in containerization, Kasten. And then I got an offer a couple of years ago to join Object First as a community manager. So no more 3 a.m. phone calls. Ransomware been hit all night. Geoff, are you ready? Yes. So that's awfully nice. So I run a community called the Object First Aces. But I'm also keeping my hands still in the pot or the pie or whatever you call it, doing a lot of technical stuff here as well, and continuing my education. I think that Michael and I will admit that if you're in this profession, it means you're the forever student. So you just can't just stop, because if you do, you'll be doing some technology which no one's using. So that's basically it. Yeah.
So Geoff, just firstly, so one of the things I always say, actually, and it reminded me when you said that, so you're at Object First, object storage being a big fundamental part of anyone that's been in the infrastructure space, sysadmin type space. So just give a 2-minute overview of what Object First is, what they do, where you store it, without it being this isn't a sponsored video.
Oh no, don't worry. I'm in marketing now, but man, I certainly stick out. So Object First. The first thing I have to say is the founders of Object First are the former founders and owners of Veeam, Radmir Timoshev and Andrei Baronov. And I think the reason they started it, because they sold Veeam, and I could have just gone and lived in an island if I was them. But I think IT is addictive. So when you start doing it, you're not going to stop, right? So they figured that they wanted to offer their former customers a very easy and safe way of storing their data. And S3 is wonderful because it has this thing called native object lock, which allows you to store your backups immutably. And the reason you want to do that is, of course, ransomware. So it's purely for Veeam, and it's S3 with immutability, native object lock. And again, it's a fun company because we've got so many former Veeamers there that they tell me the atmosphere is like at Veeam back in 2013, which of course I missed because I never worked for Veeam. So it's kind of I can kind of pretend. But it's fun, and it's also a startup, which is I always like, because this is something else. I think when we're talking about education, we can also talk about professional and what we do. I've worked at big structured companies, and my personality doesn't dig that so much because I'm kind of all over the place. And so if I see something fun, an opportunity, which I think could be really beneficial, I jump at it. Whereas in the bigger companies I worked at, they put you in a little room, they lock the door, and you've got your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you follow that list. And 5 o'clock, you're out of there, as soon as possible. I didn't work as well in those conditions. So,
yeah, I think that's obviously a big thing. And you mentioned as well, Geoff, like being a constant learner or a continuous learner. And I think I'm the same. Is that I can dart around all day learning new things, and even if it's just scraping the top of something, I find that's what gives me the dopamine that I need. And but so I've been at Veeam for 10 plus years now, focused around, obviously to begin with, it was around virtualization. Before I was at Veeam, I was working at a partner, very much focused around the compute, the storage, and the networking. I worked a lot around NetApp storage, FlexPods, etc. with Cisco Compute. Very much before that was a sysadmin type role. So I was making sure that systems were up, systems were backed up, applications were running, all of that good stuff. So, and then fast forward to Veeam, we started off protecting workloads from a VMware perspective. Virtualization was just the start type thing. And then coming up 5 years ago, we made the acquisition of Kasten, focused on Kubernetes. And then that's what gave me, so Rickatron will say, like, he parachuted me in to be the technologist focused on all that world of cloud native, DevOps, Kubernetes. And again, it was like starting a new job within a job that you'd already been in, and embracing that all of this new technology, things like infrastructure as code, Ansible, configuration management. We'll get into some of those areas as well as we talk through, because that's really what I wanted this first kind of episode to be, is one, discussing what our learning journey's been like, Geoff, in that like we're not developers. We're not developers, and we come at it from an infrastructure perspective. We come at it from we know what compute, storage, and networking is. And it's amazing still today, the DBAs that I speak to on a daily basis around protecting data, they seem to think that the database and the storage is the database layer. They don't necessarily understand what is underneath the disks and the IOPS and everything underneath that. And even as we get into cloud and cloud native workloads, PaaS, SaaS, etc., is still compute, storage, and networking, right? We can just do things a little bit quicker and maybe a little bit automated. And whenever someone says about being like automate yourself out of a job, people get a little bit antsy about that. But ultimately, I had a customer meeting this week where that's exactly what people that embrace that culture, you're going to have a much better time you're not going to be as reactive. You're going to be able to free up a lot more time to do some more interesting, exciting things, like having discussions with a lot of customers about how you're going to integrate AI into your daily workflows and stuff like that. So, Geoff, in regards to like your learning journey, so when something triggered you to go and learn the aspects of, say, Kubernetes, cloud native, Docker, containerization, all of that, talk us through that, like that initial cliff that you were on, and then you dived straight into that.
The thing I'd add right away is I've never worked in an organization where we haven't been doing more with less. So that's why automation, I've never seen it to be a threat, because they've always, at least when I was sysadmin and back in the history, there was always too much to do. So anything I could automate, I was certainly not automating myself out of a job. Now, with AI entering the scene, there's a lot of discussion about that. We can talk about that later. So when it comes to educational journey, I think there's two factors that I think are at play here. And I've noticed this with a lot of other IT type people. And IT type people is interesting because it's a huge spectrum. You have the developer introvert who, says hi and then you never hear from them again. And then you have very, outgoing people as well. And you have people in the middle, and it's enormous skill set because it's such a huge area. It's not just purely, computer. But so two things I found is, one is, if you're doing this work, you probably like it. In other words, you probably were playing with gadgets. You might have been playing some video games at some point in your life, admit it. And so, and to start with, that's actually how I got in computers, because it was a long time. I won't name the name of the game because every year it's like, what was that? But basically my computer wouldn't start the game. And so I actually got some, and there weren't even, well, it wasn't any internet. There was internet, but it was, so I had to figure out what to do. And then I was asking people back then. This is like the old going to the library thing in university. You get a little card out and try to find it. So that was rough back then. And I figured out how to add more memory. And then the game just started to play. And it was wonderful, except that I almost got divorced because I was just playing the game too often. But what happened after that was I noticed it was like an addiction that, okay, well, I want this to work better. I want this to be more efficient. And, it was Windows, this version. I was a big Windows fan. It kept coming out. And so it became useful, but fun at the same time. And it hasn't changed since then, at least when I've been in a job that I've enjoyed. So there's the one, and then of course there's a separate thing, which is, okay, the need to grow, because if you don't grow, the industry is going to move on. So there's that kind of fear, right? And I think we're seeing a lot of that with AI now. I know a lot of people are just jumping on the AI bandwagon, not necessarily because they're so interested. I mean, they are, but also there's a big fear there. So when it comes to containerization and Docker, I'd heard about Docker, but the other big challenge that we all have is if we're working at full-time jobs, it's all very nice to say, I'm going to study something brand new, but sometimes you're exhausted. Sometimes you don't have the energy. And so the trick I've always tried is to convince my boss that this is really worth studying, because then you get the best of both worlds. Now, that's not always easy to do, because with Kubernetes, sometimes, hey, Kubernetes, wow, this is so exciting. What's so exciting about it? Well, you can have multiple pods. Oh, okay. Well, what's the revenue value of this? And then you're kind of stuck for a bit. But when it comes to containerization, what happened was we were going to implement, when Veeam, at a certain company I was working at, Veeam brought in S3 storage. And they brought in this capacity tier for scale out backup repositories. And of course, where I was working and a lot of other service providers, this was just gold news for them. So right away, jump on it. And the issue came up that, how to leverage this. And so we talked to a few companies. And one of the companies said, well, really, to run this effectively the way you wanted to do it in the plan that you kind of thought up and architect, you need to use containers. So I thought, okay, and I'll never forget this. I said, well, what? Well, you can use, Docker, or better use Kubernetes. Okay, I'll go home on the weekend, read about Kubernetes, set up on Monday. So that's one of those things like when you're walking in a fog, and there's a cliff and you don't see it. And it's, well, I'll just take the next step and woo. So that's what happened. I, of course, did not learn Kubernetes over the weekend. In fact, I was a bit shocked and humbled, really seriously humbled. But I was able in a few weeks to get Docker Swarm up, which of course is another orchestrator, which it's simpler and it's good. But what I learned, and this I don't think can be changed, is complexity gives you flexibility. So the more complex, the more you can sculpt. So I was humbled. I was annoyed. I think I threw some things on the wall about Kubernetes and all that. And of course, what happens inevitably, you cool down a couple of days later, go, well, no, I got to go back and take a look at this. And then what happened was I just became addicted. And there's two major reasons for it. One, because it's fun, the things you can do with it. But also think of the scale. Everyone who became a virtualization specialist, everyone I've talked to, love the fact that, they used to run a company with server room with like 10 physical servers. And now suddenly you can have 10 of these things in one server. And the opportunities this gives you is enormous. Well, that's the same thing Kubernetes on an even smaller scale. I could take my laptop and I could suddenly run, almost like production environments, because I could emulate them very well. And after that, I will give due credit where it's due, as the CNCF created a very interesting, and we're going to talk about that, Kubernetes certification plan. Very challenging, which at first annoyed me enormously. But of course, again, you get hooked, right? It's a challenge. And so when you actually do complete it, so that's how it started. And it's gone on ever since. And like all technologies, and I suspect we might see something similar to AI, but I'm not 100% certain. There's a lot of hype at first, and everyone thinks, oh, well, next year, if you don't know Kubernetes, you're out of a job kind of thing. And the doomsday predictions, that didn't happen. Kubernetes is a learning curve. It definitely has a place, but it's like mainframes are still around. So that's my journey. And it never ends. Again, getting back to the journey thing, I think, there's another reason as well, is that we see more and more scientific data that you can live a very long, powerful life, but you have to do two things. You have to keep this working and you have to keep this working, right? You have to physically keep, doing things and all that, but mentally you have to keep your brain running. If you sit back and relax and retire, everything just slowly melts away. At least that's what I've been hearing.
Yeah, no, and I think like we've just dived straight into the world of Kubernetes there. Like Geoff, so from my perspective, I think that learning curve, you don't just from a Windows server operations type infrastructure admin perspective, you don't just dive into Kubernetes. Kubernetes can run on many different operating systems, but mostly it's going to be Linux. And I think at least my journey, having that baseline Linux understanding and experience massively helps when it comes to Kubernetes. There's a lot more CLI based, like you're in the terminal a lot more with certain command line tools. And I think if I was going to like tell me 5 years ago where do we start, it would very much be go and get a good grasp. I'm not saying go and understand and go and build your own Linux distribution from the ground up. Don't go and like recompile the kernel or anything like this. I would very much say go and understand like the command line of Linux. Go and understand how to even just using a command-based text editor, whether it's Nano or whether it's Vim or NeoVim or anything like that. I don't want to start any conflicts this early in the show, but go and learn that. Go and learn how to change directory. Go and learn networking from a Linux perspective as well. That will give you a good baseline. If I was going to start, like I created a project called 90 Days of DevOps, and me and Geoff were talking before. So I started with a big picture of what is DevOps and what does it mean. And then I jumped straight into go and learn a programming language. And I actually chose Golang. And my biggest regret of that whole project, not that it's a massive regret, but it's starting there. I should have started with Linux. Linux is the backbone to anything that we do in the enterprise. It's where most software runs, even on a virtual machine, or it's still on physical machines. It's probably so object first from an operating system point of view is going to be Linux based. Veeam have got some stuff going on. We've done a lot with Linux over the years as well. Like everyone is running some sort of Linux by far more than Windows servers in the data center. So that would be my first port to go and jump into is understanding Linux. But again, keeping to that compute, storage, and networking. Compute is going to be your Linux. You probably don't need to go and learn about hardware and CPU memory. You should probably already have a good 101 grasp of what that is. But the compute being the operating system, being the Linux layer, and either way, you're probably gonna know Windows anyway. Majority of our laptops are gonna have that. If you're running Mac OS, you're already a lot further down the line. You're already going to be a Unix-based system. The biggest way I learned Linux, like to the next level, was convert a laptop and use Linux, and use that on a daily basis. Like that would be my first part. So, Geoff, do you have anything to share in regards to resources? I know I've got some, but I'll let you go first, mate.
Yeah. So, keeping in stride with the whole learning thing, and also I agree totally with the programming, because programming can be. There's a lot of us who didn't come from technical backgrounds like myself and just fell into IT because a massive amount of jobs and it's fun. And so, but programming is a kind of a deeper level. I don't think it's impossible for anyone. I think the problem is it takes a very slow and calm approach. And, kind of reminds me of what they used to say about high school math. You can be a genius, but you can't jump to level 5 without doing 1, 2, 3, 4, because it builds on the other. Whereas the mindsets of like some people I know are linguistics people. They can wiggle their way around if they're smart, and they can actually, manage. I mean, it's still going to be less the foundation, but with these things, you just have to. And again, I agree. The Linux learning, and Linux is fun. That the other thing I'll say too is people sometimes get not scared. I don't want to use the word scared, but worried about the command lines can be more work and a nuisance. I mean, it's so much nicer to click on a button. But what I try to say is it's the power, the extra power it gives you. That makes, and also when you're typing, once you get really fast at it, it actually is faster than using the mouse. I can actually get things done quicker sometimes. Not in games, of course, but not that I play those. So, yeah, what did I want to share? So a couple things. I've been keeping my eyes open, and I do this all the time. Well, I'll show this one first. And what I try to look at, link and feed mainly, but I'm on a bunch of distribution groups. And I recommend people do that because it's a huge field and there's a lot of interesting things happening. And so what I do is every morning when I wake up, well, not right away, I was advised not to do that. Don't pick up your phone right when you wake up. But let's say a couple hours later, I look at all my little newsletters, I look at my link and feed, and I look for interesting things, which I think might be useful professionally, but also fun. And so because AI is such a big thing right now, the first thing I wanted to share was this Everworker, which let me just figure out how to get this over here. 1 second. It's the first time I'm using this platform, so I just want to make sure I go to the right place. Okay, you're seeing my screen now. I see. There we go. This is what we want to see, right? Okay. There we go. Always fun to technology. So this is something called Everworker Academy. And I stumbled upon it. And what I like, and I must admit, and look, I'm not a freeloader or anything like that, but I also don't have tons of money to spend like thousands of dollars on courses. So if I see good quality courses that are free, I'm going to jump with them, right? So what I liked about Ever Academy is it's free right off the bat. And keep in mind too, there's a lot of people out there who are students who they just don't have the money, period. And you can get by, even with Kubernetes, learning it without paying a cent. Believe me, a little more challenging, but you can do it. Anyways, so Ever Academy, AI based. It's a company which is basically building, as I understand it, helpers. So they're not going to take everyone's job. There's certain things that AI simply can't do. I don't care what. A week ago, Geoffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI, had a talk at the University of Toronto. Fantastic, and I went there in person. It was wonderful. And so he's very doomsday-ish about it. This take all our jobs. But the business people are saying, well, we don't think so, because the question of reasoning, that's another long story, but whether these things can reason well like a human can, I certainly don't think they can replace me, because my wife has said at times I'm irreplaceable, but not in the positive sense. But well, no, I'm making that up. But anyway, so they have a learning academy. They are going to expand it. And I thought this AI fundamentals for business professionals, don't let that title scare you, because normally when I see anything for business professionals or for financial experts, I think fluff. I think this is just, la, la, la. And this was not. This was actually a lot of things here I'd already learned, a couple other courses I'd taken, but really nicely brought together for a first-time view. So I really enjoyed it. And they make you take a little exam. Obviously, it's not going to be, you're not paying for it, so it's not going to be moderated, anything like that. But just don't cheat, right? What's the point of cheating on a free exam, right? I've never understood that. People like open the other thing. This is, I'm so smart. Of course, no one's moderating. But so it says for business professionals, but what it means is they're not diving into deep, algorithms of mathematics right away. And let me see if I press this, what comes up. Yeah, so it's basic level, 2 hour. You do it, during the time you want. I got 92, so I didn't cheat, right? I didn't get 100. And objectives gives you a very clear path of the objectives. But it goes in, it tells you basically how these things are working, LLMs. And if you had never studied AI, have no clue about it, it's a very good place to start. So I'll look at people have already put 5s on there. I didn't even know you could do a review. And you get a certificate. So that's always nice. Now, let's see if their catalog, they add anything new. I think there's only one course for now. But keep these things in mind, these free academies. Now, some, and I'll warn you, some are more trying to sell you their product, right? It's like, every second thing is, and our product is great. What's the correct answer? Oh, your product is great. I actually once went through one of those on purpose and gave the wrong answers just to see if it would annoy somebody. I don't think it did. But this is genuinely good. Okay, the second thing I want to show you is, and this is what happens sometimes. You're doing work, you're studying things, and you miss something completely. I don't know, it kind of sails by and you missed it. and that's called Podman Play. Okay, so we all know Podman. There's something called Podman Play, and what that is allows you to use YAML files, so like Kubernetes manifest, to build inside of Podman pods. Now, it's not full-blown Kubernetes, but it's excellent for a training environment. I mean, you can actually run things on it too. I mean, don't get me wrong. But if you are even struggling with whatever you've got at home to run a K3S, or or a Minix like Minikube, or it's just too challenging, this is an alternative. And I'll show you this. And it's just fun too. So I actually have a VM I created for this. I want my laptop too. My laptop is already bursting at the seams, so I had to create one.
Jeff, I think you're showing the same Everwork.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, here we go. I gotta stop sharing.
Share everything.
There you go. Now I'll start sharing again. This is the technical fun.
Yeah, no worries.
So I'm going to select a tab. Oh, you know what? There we go. Window. There we go.
I think, and whilst you do that, like, so there'll be people on the stream, and there'll be people watching the video afterwards. So Jeff's brain has dived around a few areas there. One, from an AI perspective, obviously everyone's talking about it, and everyone wants to use it. You're going to notice, like, the industry from a technology point of view, AI is going to be in everything, whether it is or whether it isn't. Like, we're going to have to understand terminology around that. And I know, like, we wanted to focus this on cloud and DevOps.
Yeah,
there's no getting away that AI is going to, and already has, infiltrated the world of automation and cloud and everything around that. What we want to do is share these sites, these resources that are either top of mind for me and Geoff, but also give you some of that foundational as well. Like I mentioned around Linux, I'll touch on some of that area in a bit. Geoff, you just touched on Podman. People might not know what Docker is. People might not know what containerization, but think of these resources as playgrounds to be able to go in, and they're going to walk you through and give you that 101 of what is a container. And then hopefully as you go through that, you're going to get that understanding of, oh, this is a container. So you most likely will have heard of Docker. Podman is a similar go-to-market, if you will, way of containerizing your workload. And Podman is just another way of doing that. Like we have Docker Desktop, which is a way in which we can run Docker containers locally. Podman is very, very similar to that. But Geoff, let me click this on.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because there is Podman Desktop, and I should have maybe started with Podman Desktop. Maybe that's for next episode, because that is very similar. So Podman, by the way, is from Red Hat. So we all know Red Hat. So the reason I would say that I'm interested in this as well is because it kind of ties into OpenShift, which is the bigger product, the Kubernetes of Red Hat. And in fact, Red Hat's virtualization now is called OpenShift virtualization. So it's all kind of coming together and tying together. So Podman is totally free, and you can run very similar commands to Docker. And I said again, this Podman Play is something that strikes me as interesting because it's merging the Kubernetes world even closer. So it's like a different level, a little bit geeky stuff. So I'll show you what I have here. Oops, I just pressed something. 1 second. You can still see my screen?
Yeah, so I can see.
Oh, you know what? I'm probably, because I'm not on the thing. There we are. Okay. I was typing in the web window, which of course, who knows what button you press? Leave. All right. So this is, I'll make this a bit bigger. This is your standard YAML file. Okay. So this is something anybody who does Kubernetes or knows Kubernetes or is learning Kubernetes will know what a pod is. A pod is a basic element in Kubernetes, which can contain one or more containers. But this is Podman. So if you look at the structure of this YAML file, this is exactly the same as what you would see if you were building a Kubernetes pod, okay? But this I'm going to run in Podman Play. And it's a very simple command. In fact, I've already started it because I always start these things before a demo just in case they crash and I don't look stupid. So the command is very simple. Podman Play cube. I'll find it here. I'll just run it myself. Well, I won't run it because I already did. So Podman Play cube, and then the name of your YAML file. Okay. So I ran that already. So that's already running. And then what I can do is podman pod. Okay, so that's different because normally if you want to see your containers in Docker or in Podman, you do Podman or Docker PS. And I'll do that now. And yes, they're all containers. You can see there. But in Podman, you can also do Podman pod PS. And this is bringing you more of a Kubernetes look, right? So here I have 3 pods: database, front end, and back end. Now, when you think, where did you get this application from, Geoff? I was going to say, well, I did 90 Days of DevOps, his Michael Cade's Python thing, and I learned it inside out. No, I'm lying. I vibe coded. So that's something we'll talk about later on, because obviously I'm not that good at Python. But what I created was a little application. I asked the AI, okay, I want to do a demo. Can you write me something which won't flop and is relatively simple for Podman Play? And that's what it did. So you have 3 pods. If you see here are the 3 pods. I don't know if you can see my mouse. I think you can. And then those 3 pods, these are the actual containers of those pods, except for the first one. Step CA is my certificate authority that I use, so disregard that one. So you have a Kubernetes mindset here, but you've also got like a Docker view of the Podman. So I really like that. And let me just share now what this actually shows you, because it's kind of neat. And that's actually going to show you this whole thing of, which we'll probably have a whole episode on vibe coding, which is just insane. Let me just find my, so tell me if you can see this. You can see that?
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So this looks really good. I mean, people used to pay money for this kind of thing. And all this does is a Podman Play Cube demo, okay, multi-container application deployed with a single command. And I can test backend service, and then it does this. It connects up to it, or check database, checks the database. It shows the architecture. 3 containers, we saw that already on the command line. 1 network, so you have to create a network, and 3 volumes. So this has actually got persistent data in it too, right? So the idea is, theoretically, after running this and testing it here, I could take this. In fact, that's something I might try later on. You've given me an idea. Take that YAML and put it into K3S or into Minikube and try there. You have to make certain changes, for instance, when it comes to networking and the storage. But nevertheless, it's very, very close. So that's my kind of neat, nerdy stuff. I've been able to talk about Podman, Docker, Kubernetes, and vibe coding all in one. So maybe a bit of over.
Yeah, that's awesome, Geoff. I think there's a couple of things that I think to highlight. If there's people watching, like you've said a few things that might sound alien to a lot of people. One would be that YAML, yet another markup language. I think it's fundamentally important. Like I mentioned about Linux and understanding the underpinnings of Linux, whether it be command line, bash script, shell scripts, etc. Being able to do something, automate something in Linux. YAML is also something that you're gonna, if you're traversing down that DevOps learning journey, you're 100% going to come across YAML. YAML's a serialization, serial language, if you will, that you basically define what you want. And you're going to see this in things like Ansible playbooks. You're going to see it in infrastructure as code like Terraform. You're going to see it in many like different CI/CD pipelines, continuous integration, continuous deployment. Ultimately, though, YAML, and I nearly missed off the most important one, is probably Kubernetes manifest. As Geoff said, he could take that application now that's running on his laptop, and he can feed that into an EKS cluster or a managed Kubernetes environment that's much bigger, more powerful, costs more money, and he could get his little vibe coded application up and running somewhere else and scale it up to the many thousands of people that might want to use it. And yeah, absolutely. I think we should maybe do a session on vibe coding, or how an infrastructure admin or an operations skilled person can leverage AI to fast track their knowledge using AI. Like, so I don't know, Geoff, whether the vibe coding was this is what I want, and you're just going to trust all the code that you put into it. But equally, like the concept of vibe coding means many different things. And I think there's a future episode on that. If that's of interest, let us know. So yeah, YAML is a fundamental again of what you should learn. Now let's see if I can share. So I mentioned this before, and this isn't. Yeah, this is just a project that I started in 2022, and it was really about me learning in public. All of these, the concepts of DevOps, the process, the principles of DevOps, and then that's grown over the years. And I'll just take a few minutes just to give it a bit of an overview. But basically, the first year was just simply me writing down every day for 90 days. If you go from January the 1st to March the 31st, is exactly 90 days, perfect for a title. And it just rolls off the tongue. But what I wanted to do, so the preamble to that is that a lot of smart people in the industry had done some other 100 days of Kubernetes or 100 days of cloud. I didn't want to lock myself down to having to sit in front of a computer and write out a blog for each day of that. I would have got bored very quickly. So what I did was I took chunks of the learning curve of a DevOps roadmap, if you will, and went, I'm going to spend 7 days on this. And I'm going to spend 7 days on that. So where we started was, and hopefully you can see this, is one, there's a really long list of these articles. And we basically started as a what is and why do we use DevOps? Very big picture, right? This is looking at like the responsibilities of a DevOps engineer, and that's titled that way for a particular reason, is that a DevOps engineer is no different to a sysadmin in my opinion. A sysadmin should be leveraging DevOps processes, tooling, etc. Anyway, and it talks about the life cycle. Also, I would argue that let's say you're in a job today as a sysadmin, infrastructure admin, cloud engineer, whatever that may be, but you don't, as a company, build any software yourself. Oh, I can't be a DevOps engineer. That isn't the case at all. I believe that there are many principles, tooling that you should take advantage of within the DevOps ecosystem to make your life easier. Be it, that could be infrastructure as code to quickly provision a group of virtual machines inside your vSphere environment, or some cloud instances, or cloud RDS, or PaaS-based systems. You don't have to use all of these to adopt DevOps or understand DevOps. So basically what we did here is, and this is where I was talking about, we spent 7 days just learning the fundamentals of Golang as a programming language. And I even go into, okay, so Golang versus Python, as Geoff mentioned, in the next year we do touch on Python as well, but I wanted to touch on Go here. And the reason why Go is that Kasten is built predominantly using Golang as a programming language, and it's also what Kubernetes is written in, it's what Docker was written in, it's what Prometheus is written in. A lot of these new tooling is written in Golang. So we talk about that, and then we talk about how to set up and get that famous Hello World application up and running. And we actually build out an app that then went into tweeting your progress, but Twitter then changed their APIs and all of that. Then we get into that Linux basics. And I think if I had the chance to go again, I would move that up. I would put that knowing Linux basics, as I've said many times already on this session, is what, like the command line. What about the Linux file system? What about the Linux system storage, the text editors, things like SSH, understanding what SSH is and what it gives you. There's also a sprinkling of DevOps tooling being used within that section around using HashiCorp Vagrant to spin up a test environment, spin up your first Linux machine in a very, very simple, fast way without you really having to like wipe a business laptop or anything to get going. Then we get on to networking. So remember, I keep on saying compute, storage, and networking. So we're going to learn our computing layer here. Then we need to know our networking. And this is fundamental networking. This isn't particular, or at least the first part is around, well, what is the big picture about networking? You'll see things like the OSI model, the application layer, network protocols, HTTP, TCP, UDP, etc. All of that will go through, and if I don't want to spend too much time on each of these, but then we get into a cloud provider. You can see how I went in a very modular way to look at all of these areas. So I went out to Twitter. I asked what cloud provider should I cover. So in this instance, we covered Azure. And once you learn one cloud, there's a very good way. It's a very easy then transition to go and learn AWS and Google and any other cloud for that matter. Then Git, such a fundamental part. Even if you're a sysadmin, I imagine everyone who's listening in has got a GitHub account or has used Git, a version control system to store your application code, your bash scripts, your Terraform infrastructure as code, basically anything. This whole 90 Days of DevOps repository was written using Git and Git-based services, so it touches on that. Then we get into containers. So before we get into that world of Kubernetes and everything that Geoff was touching on, we've got to understand what a container is and how that can help from a packaging point of view. Before we then get into Kubernetes, which is more of an orchestration of those containers and bringing in those multiple containers to form an application. Then we get into infrastructure as code. Things like I've mentioned Terraform, OpenTofu, Pulumi. All of them are like valid ways in which we can accelerate our deployment of virtual machines, cloud-based services, etc. So having an understanding of how to spell Terraform and how to use it is a key part of that. Then you may have heard of, so we mentioned Red Hat from an OpenShift perspective. Red Hat also have Ansible. Ansible's a configuration management. So where Terraform will get you a machine or a group of machines up and running, Ansible goes up one step further and can get you your application. It can start to deploy Postgres, deploy MongoDB, a replica set around that, your Kubernetes environment, anything like that. Then again, this will depend on the systems that you work on today as to whether you're even creating software, and things like CI/CD and continuous integration, continuous deployment. How do we get from development of software and then release that into an environment? Then we start to get to the boring bits of this. So monitoring, log management, but also a necessity to that, right? How do we monitor? How does observability actually integrate and intertwine into all of these areas? It's great to be able to spin up an environment like an application like Geoff did, but if that was to be an actual production application, how do we monitor that? How do we understand when bad things are happening, tracing and all of that good stuff? So we touch on that. And then from a Veeam perspective, how do we protect that data? Don't worry, there isn't any particular product focus in there, but it's focusing about how do we protect data regardless of platform on that. And then just to quickly skim over what that second year looks like, I got some help from some smart people in the community, and I wanted to incorporate security. One thing that you would notice that we just brushed over massively in that first section was security. And this was 2023 was the year of security really kicking off, in my opinion. And we saw things like DevSecOps be a big title across many organizations, many vendors. So I went out and I spoke to some friends, and they came along and they did the sections for each of these areas. And then we got into some of the areas that we didn't cover, things like Python, AWS, Red Hat OpenShift, databases, serverless, service mesh, and then what does it look like once you've delivered your version 1? What does it look like after that? And again, we've got that long list of all those areas. In 2024, we changed things up into more of a we wanted to go more, instead of just written content, we wanted to go more video content. And this was the first call for papers that went out for this. So we had actually 91 sessions. And this ranges from all areas of DevOps, people's different circumstances, different perspectives, different tooling, and that will take you a good while to go through those videos. But sorry, I know I've just chatted for like continuous for 10 minutes there, but
perfect.
yeah, and it's still going. Like the most important thing for this is that it's still a live project that's still happening. But just to roll back on the important thing here, like if I go into the Linux side of things again, it's not necessarily like I'm learning in public. I'm writing my own blog for future me, and if it helps one person, then it's useful. But at the bottom of each of these, we've got some resources. Some of these are a bit outdated, but some of them are still very much valid, especially when it comes to Linux. And you'll see some resources here of much smarter people than me that I used to consolidate into that particular blog post. So the one that I wanted to call out is in particular is Tech World with Nana. And if you're looking to start your learning journey anywhere and you like video content, then I'm going to share this YouTube channel. Over 1 million subscribers, so you get the impression that they're doing some good stuff over there. And really being able to go through just looking at these for you, like what's a cloud engineer roadmap? DevSecOps Go in 1.5 hours, Docker for the absolute beginner, Nginx, Azure DevOps. Like there are so much good quality content here that I have to share that, because I've watched the majority of these videos. The other one, and this might lead you, Geoff, into your exam addiction, I'm going to call it that, is in particular a training company called Code Cloud. Again, nothing sponsored here. I know we've had them on various other shows, but the content that that they bring is very, it's not very long, and it's very, very good and powerful in terms of it's going to get the point across. And if you went there, like they do lots of different, but this Kubernetes learning path in particular is a very interesting way about like navigating that path. So if you know nothing at all, it's going to go, right, let's understand what is a 12-factor application, what is a microservice, what is like the prerequisites. Then you see Linux for beginners, again, going back to harp on to what I said. Then we're going to go into Docker. What is Docker for absolute beginners? We're then going to do a Kubernetes for beginners, which to me, Geoff, that session right there, that Kubernetes for beginners, was the eye-opener for me. It was 6 hours long, but it was so informative.
Yeah.
And current. And I think that's another thing with Kubernetes. It's so fast-moving as a landscape. It was so current and so informative and filled so many gaps that I had. It was super important. Justin Garrison did a great one on Amazon EKS as well. Helm being a package manager for Kubernetes, Istio being a service mesh. You can just see as a roadmap, like this is many hours you could spend going through this. But you can see that there are so much to go on. So Geoff, we haven't got long before we have to cut this, but talk us through like your learning journey, but also how you like why exams? Because I'm not a fan of exams, but you might be able to convince me. I just get massive anxiety, so I don't do them. But talk us through the layers and the levels of what you did and why. Why did you do it?
So first of all, I'll also mention about Code Cloud. I was actually a Code Cloud ambassador for 1 year. They give you a 1-year stint. I think they might still be running the program, but that was very good. I got a free subscription for a year, so that was wonderful. When it comes to exams, Michael's right. This is a very personal thing. My situation is this. I find that unless I have something that's in front of me in the roadmap, which is scaring me, I tend to wander off the path. So, for instance, I did 7 marathons before, and I want to get back on that. But the only way I was able to do that was to pay the 300 or whatever. Well, it wasn't 300 back then, probably is now $200, and tell all my friends, guess what? I signed up for a marathon, because now I have this huge burden of no, Geoff, you can't wander off and start playing lacrosse or go back to ice hockey. You got to do this. So for me, that helps in a disciplinary fashion as well, especially because this is fun. And so the 90 days of DevOps, there's so many topics there. What you really need to do is go through 1, 2, 3, 4 and force yourself to do that. And I find for me, it's better to do it that way. Also, I hate exams too. I mean, that's the weird thing. I remember the first time I did the CKA, which I failed by, I think it was like 20 points. So it was extraordinarily annoying. It was 3 hours at the time, and it was command line. So this was not, multiple choice. Okay, let me guess. Oh, I got it right. No, this is something's broken. You have to fix it. So it was like putting yourself into a work disaster situation, which you hate, and you're doing it voluntarily, and you're paying $300 to do this. And so when you fail, it was incredibly annoying. I walked around in a bad mood for 4 days. Normally I walk around in a bad mood for 1 day or 2. This was 4 days. And then after the 4 days, again, that moment came, I'm going back into the ring. I want to do it again. But then when you pass, oh boy. And what I'll say is this about that, and marathon running too. You realize very soon, once you cross the finish line the first time, you get that medal, you get that certification, you're all joyful, this big dopamine thing. And then it goes away. Everything in life goes away, except the systems that you built. And I'm talking about the mental systems. So to get that exam, to run that marathon, you had to create a structured program. You had to follow through of it. You had to eat correctly. You had to study the right things. You had to do this to be able to get over that finish line. Okay, that medal is now, my last one's from 2016. But what was done mentally, prepare for that, I'm using every day. And every time you do that, it's going to stay with you. But again, you don't necessarily have to do the exam. Some people can get by without any problems at all doing it. Me, I find that's good. I'll also mention about Code Cloud. That is one of the reasons they're fantastic. They have practice exams, which are so close, not in content and questions, but in situation to the real exams. That's the only reason I'll pass. I'll tell you, because I did some other courses. They weren't bad courses, but the exam itself, command line exams, or what do you call them? Performance-based exams, whatever they are. I think Red Hat have them too, are completely different, because you're put in a stressful situation. Your time's running out. It's like having your manager behind you in the old days going, fix this now. What am I paying you for? And so how do you prepare for that? You do them over and over again. I did those practice exams, I don't know, 15, 20 times. I hated them after a while. But when I went to the real exam, guess what? I'm used to this. So that's why I enjoyed those.
Yeah, I think that's probably where I am, the one that doesn't like exams. But equally, I know there's a lot of people out there, Geoff, that like you need to have the exam. You need that from a partner perspective. You need that from an end user, because that validates it. You might need it for a job. Like, how many people need 15 years of Kubernetes experience? It's not been around for 15 years, but recruiters don't necessarily know that either. But I'm fortunate in a way that I can go through the training. I have those structures in place to be able to do that. Equally, I like sharing my learning journey as well, which is why 90 Days of DevOps existed and started. Again, I have that mindset of, if it helps one person, even if that one person is me in the future, then I'm going to do it. But I don't have to validate that using or doing exams. Yeah. So I think, hopefully this has been useful for those either on the stream or watching the video after the fact. Now, that's the first one over, Geoff. Now we have to ask, like, what should we do next? Because I think we've got a few ideas. We can go down, or one, less speaking, or less talking head stuff, and get more demos in place. Obviously, you touched on AI, and I know that's a learning journey that you're on as well. And I've done some MCP buzzword stuff as well recently around a little side project that I'm working on. Equally, I think one thing that we didn't touch on is home labs, and I'm big into the home labs and getting hands-on and that's how it sticks for me is actually playing around with stuff. So maybe that's an area. But let us know what you'd like to see. I think another thing that me and Geoff have done, or thinking about what we've spoken about in the past, is I've seen a load of different games on Kubernetes and in Docker containers, and that might
don't tell my boss.
That might be a fun way of which boss? Anyway, but that might be a fun way of actually describing, like, getting into what is YAML, what is what is the power of Kubernetes and why, and we can start touching on some of that stuff. I think Linux, maybe just navigating around Linux could be an interesting one. Looking at infrastructure as code with Terraform, looking at secrets management, like let us know, I think, is the path. I think also being able to cover off things around like news as well. So I wanted to talk about Google's outage the other week and various other things that are out there. I think we could absolutely bring a section into the call around that as well. But yeah, thanks for sticking around. Thanks for joining. Geoff, anything else to add?
No, I mean, I think that's perfect idea. And I think especially the home lab thing, one thing I'd like to show people who are interested is a lot of us tend to have old things lying around, old laptops just lying around, they're just collecting dust. But with Kubernetes, you can actually make those things work again. Like I've got them around the house hiding in a little network of Kubernetes things. But there's a lot of fun things, and also the news as well. I'm also interested too is if people would like to have us try to get people on to interview as well, to bring a little bit of flavor in. So if we wanted to bring particular specialists in a certain field, and yeah, basically feedback is very important.
Yeah. So on that, like we know people that have transitioned from like VMware admins, both with networking backgrounds, storage backgrounds, that might be interesting for you folks to listen to, hear from, ask questions. Yeah, hopefully it was useful. Let us know. Awesome. Cheers, Geoff.
Thanks, Michael. See you, folks.